What's up, YouTubers and plant lovers? It's Justin, and today I was going to show you how I replant my Cafe Arabica. Now, as you probably heard it's called the coffee tree. This is a different one for me. I'm not used to a tropical plant that doesn't like a whole bunch of light. And that's the case with this guy. Coffee trees, surprisingly, don't get very tall. And actually, coffee grown worldwide can all trace its heritage back several hundred years to ancient coffee forests on the Ethiopian plateau. So they do originate kind of from tropical Africa. Like I said, they don't get too tall. They're normally found growing on like a hill or a mountainside and underneath the crown line. So the light that they do receive is often dappled or filtered light. And as you can kind of tell, I set mine out earlier this year to get better light. And he lost a couple of leaves in the middle, and the rest of them really became discolored and brown and crinkled. So note to self, they do not like very bright direct light. They actually like it rather muted some. They can take a little bit of direct light, but not for long because the leaves will burn easily. Now, coming from tropical Africa, what matters most to these guys is water and humidity. And found growing on a hill or a mountainside, they usually get great drainage. So make sure that whatever kind of soil you give your plant, your pot has ample drainage holes in it, and the soil drains relatively quickly because these guys do not like to be stuck in saturated soils all the time. So as long as it's able to kind of drain out, or if you have a cachet pot with a little container or saucer underneath it, make sure you kind of help them out and drain it as best as you can. That being said, the success for the coffee trees is basically to kind of mimic or best mimic the conditions found around tropical Africa. And like I said, they like a lot of humidity, a great amount of water, great drainage, somewhat cooler temperatures, low lights, and really kind of rich, organic, kind of composted, acidic soil for them. So they do love acidity in their soil. They can tolerate a rather large range for the pH of the soil. I want to say around 4 on up to 7. But they're really kind of most home when the soil is around 6 to 6.5. So they do kind of like it slightly acidic, but they can kind of tolerate larger, more acidic soils than other plants can, and that will help them out a lot. Interesting footnote, just about every part of the coffee tree is toxic, except for the mature fruiting kind of fruit that we harvest and brew for coffee. Everything else is toxic to pets, birds specifically, cats, dogs, and to little ones like us as well. So if you do have a child that goes around, or an animal that likes to put things in their mouth, I would not keep this plant. And if you do, keep it away from anybody that can accidentally pick something up and ingest it. Symptoms include kind of cramping, soreness of stomach, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, and in some cases you could probably even die if you had enough. So be very careful with this plant. It really makes you wonder how they came across this a long time ago. I've always heard stories about goat herders who noticed their goats were eating on the plant and noticed that it kind of sped them up and they were acting a little goofy. So they decided to brew the stuff for themselves, and that's how we've come across coffee. But obviously the goats weren't eating on the leaves or the stems, anything except the fruit, because it is fairly toxic. So you have to be careful with that. Like I said though, these trees, as long as you increase your pot size, your trees will put on a lot of mass and actually kind of go on to their next stage. When I first got this tree, I should say trees, when they're sold in stores, it's often like anywhere from like 6 to 10 trees in the same little container. And that was the case for this one too. I believe when I got it, it had 6 stems. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And there's still 6 here. It looks like it tried to get a 7th one, but he didn't do so well. But whenever I got it, I should have separated them. I did not. I kept it around in this little container thinking it was going to die, and that I wasn't going to be able to do too well with it. But if you saw the last video on this tree, you'll know I've had it for about 4, maybe 5 years now. So it's definitely time to increase the pot size on this guy. And whenever you get him, it's in like a little 3 or 4 inch container size, and then I jumped him up to an 8 inch, and now he's going up to about a 14 inch pot, something that'll give him a lot more room for his roots to kind of spread out and focus more on trunk development and stems and leaves. And then after the 14 inch pot, the last container size you want to do is something about the equivalent of a half a wine barrel. So you don't necessarily have to put it in a half of wine barrel or whiskey barrel, but you definitely want something that's right up there alongside for that in terms of mass, because they're going to have a lot of organic material in order to break it down and develop the roots and the leaves and especially the flowers that lead to the fruits that we all love so much. So if you are wanting to grow coffee in your own home and you're wanting it to fruit and get the beautiful white, really smelly flowers, I hear a lot of people say they smell great, they last about a month, and they fill up your whole house, but they won't do that until I jump them up in a much larger pot. So hopefully I didn't stunt them too much, although it does look like they've got a little bit of mass, but I think a larger pot will do him a lot better. So I'm gonna go ahead and take him off the table and put the new container up here and mix in my soils that I want for this tree. So yeah, here is the new pot, and I went ahead and cleaned it out, washed it out with hot soap and water as always. Even if this is a container that you've had yourself, always clean out your containers before putting a new plant in there. It'll start them off better and healthier because you don't know what may have been down there previously, or if even something may have died. I know that oftentimes when you go to Lowe's or Walmart or Home Depot, you'll look in there and there'll be all kinds of feathers and bugs and nests and dead things in there. So always make sure you clean them out, even if you think it does look clean, because you never know what was in there. Now, as I said previously, they like really well-draining soil, so something with a lot of sand or perlite or pumice can help with water retention, and that's why I'm using the Miracle-Gro Cactus citrus and succulent mix, because it has a lot of sand in there and will help water drain out the bottom with its drainage holes in there. Now that was less than a quarter of a bag, so barely any soil is even covering the bottom. So we'll go ahead and open up another one and probably fill it up to about a quarter, maybe a little bit more than a quarter of the pot. Alright. It's going to kind of even out the soil so it's not all lumped in and uneven. And it's about right here, so I'd say almost halfway, not quite. And because coffee is more of an indoor plant where I come from, I'm going to be using this indoor potting mix. As I spoke about it last time, it is designed to prevent fungus gnats and aphids and any other kind of soil-loving creatures from settling down in there and seeking shelter and all that. And now I've got it filled up to about 3/4 of the way. I'm going to go ahead and make a little divot in here for the root mass to sit on. And as I said, they love acidity. So I've got some of this Stay Green Organics Cocoa Core. Cocoa Core really helps with the pH of your soil. So I'm going to mix some of this in around where the root mass is going to sit, just to kind of help give the plant more acidity. Healthy layer in there. Now with my hands, I'm going to just mix it up just a little bit. You don't want the nutrients to sit all in one spot. You want it to kind of be equal, and it gives me a reason to get my fingernails and hands all dirty. So just take your fingers and get down in there and go down to about a quarter of the pot. You don't want to dig too much into where the sand and all that is down at the bottom, because that will help with the drainage. But the roots are going to go down in there and reach pretty far, so you do want there to be a lot of that added goodness down in the middle of the pot too, and further down in there. Now I've taken my hands and kind of just dug back the soil onto the sides, and I'd say the bottom of my divot comes to about right here. It's fairly deep, and I will probably pack more of this cocoa coir down the bottom just to kind of always help with the acidity. And add in just a little bit more soil. Just because I don't want the root ball sitting too low. If you have them sitting very low, it won't take long until the roots start poking out the bottom and you think, oh, it's time to repot already? And as always, I've got my little bucket down below to catch any of that dirt that's going to fall out whenever I go to transplant the coffee tree. It's funny, I get a lot of comments nowadays, why do you do this in your living room? Well, I don't have a whole lot of space. I don't have a grow shed. I don't have a greenhouse. I do have a grow room though, so a lot of my plants stay in there with the LEDs. But if I decided to record in there, you would probably call somebody on me because I've got a lot of plants. But never fear, life is always messy a little bit. So is gardening. And it's almost winter here in Kentucky, so if I did it outside, I would be freezing. Even with a jacket. Now, I've got my pruning shears and my root rake, so I'm going to stick the root rake down into the soil a little bit to kind of loosen up the mass around the roots. Be very gentle. You don't want to run it into the roots and then pull them up and rip them. I'm just lightly sifting through here with barely any pressure at all to kind of loosen up soil around the roots. Because like I said, if you get it down under a root and you're not paying attention, you rip it up, you could end up hurting your plant. It could be a main root for one of these smaller trees. So you're just kind of loosening up the top of the soil, really. Now, I'm going to turn him over and empty out as much of that soil as I can. Yeah. He's been in here about 2 years, so he is caked in here pretty good. A little helpful tip, go ahead and give him some water at least 24 hours before you plan on repotting him to help you out with the root mass and all that soil. If you do it and it's all dry, you'll be here for days trying to get your plant out of the pot. And don't apply much pressure at all. Let the root mass do the work. You're just gently guiding him out. All right. Now, I've got him out, and he's in this little just compressed matter of root mass. So all I'm doing is gently working my thumb and my fingers around here, trying to knock off any loose dirt that I can. You don't want to break too much of the roots. Generally with any given plant, you can remove some of the root mass, though depending on the plant, you don't want to do too much. So if I were going to keep them in the same container and just wanted to trim the roots back just a bit so that he would fit in there and not be so snug, I would probably remove about 20%, maybe 25% of the roots mass. That way he'd fit back down in there. But I'm sure you could probably go just a little bit more, but look that up just to be sure. And just take your time, just kind of work your fingers down around the bottom, off to the side. That's why I have this little bucket here to catch any of this falling debris. And be patient and be gentle. aren't too tough, so it doesn't take much to kind of snap them or rip them up. Alright, now I've got the root mass about where I want it. So before I go any further, I'm going to take some more of this sandy soil and mix in some around the top, just to make sure that it's going to have good drainage, not just at the bottom of the pot, but through where the roots will sit as well. So I'm going to mix it all up again, make sure I can see a decent amount of the cocoa core and some sand in there too. And again, just take your hands and get the soil to kind of build up on the side, leaving a nice ample dimple in the middle of the container. And again, I'll just mix in a light little bit of sandy soil to make sure his drainage is about where I want it to be. Alright, next I will take my sanitized pruning shears and hold up the root mass with one hand and trim off some of the excess roots. Not much. Anything that sticks out about 3 inches or a little bit more, or less rather. It's not all going to have a ruler next to it, although I'll always keep one handy, if you know what I mean. Can't be an avid grower and not know how big things are. And like I said, just trim back the longer ones. That way he'll already have room, but now he'll have even more. Alright, now just set your tree down in there in the divot, and then take the soil that is alongside the walls and kind of push it down right where you want your coffee tree to sit. Alright, and as always, you want to compress it, not just around the root mass, but around the sides too. Tamp it down. You want to rid the soil of any air bubbles that may remain that will actually wreak havoc on your coffee tree and the roots and potentially kill the plant. Tamp it down fairly well. You're not doing it to break any roots, but you do want to provide some pressure to get the soil down, and that'll help support the tree as well. Now, just as important as it is to have plenty of organic matter in your soil, you want to have a lot of sand in there too. They come from the rainforest, so they are used to having a lot of rain and water in their soil, and you want to make sure that it will drain away relatively fast. So I'm going to add more of that soil in there, and then take some cocoa core, mix it in on the top layer too. Now I will mix in the rest of this other soil. And try not to make a mess like I did. Now, as I was saying, if you find that your coffee tree has kind of stopped or plateaued, increase the container size. Because once they get to a certain point with their roots, if they're not able to produce any more roots, they're not going to put on any more mass above the soil as well. Now, following mixing all the soil in and getting the soil level to where I want it to be, I will tamp it down lightly on top, because I've already tamped down all this mess in the middle of the container. And then the only thing left to do would be to water it to further remove any other air bubbles that may have gotten by from tamping. Now, don't forget, as I said, they do come from the rainforest, so they do like a lot of water and even more humidity. If you find that your tips are browning and leaves are kind of looking a little meh, the stems, increase your humidity as well. I have mine sitting rather close to a humidifier at night, and I can tell it's helped mine tremendously. You really shouldn't let the soil dry out completely. Whenever it dries out maybe about halfway, I always try to water it again. Like I said, they are from the tropics, and they are grown on a mountainside, so their drainage is exquisite. So you don't want it sitting in soaking wet water and soils all the time, because they will drown and succumb to root rot. So if you do keep a saucer, I would drain it after about 20 minutes. If you leave a saucer on there at all times and the water is just in there, the soil's not going to dry out, and your plant will die. Like I said, there's really only one more stage after this, and that's going to be to move it up to a larger container still, up to about the size of half a wine barrel. And that will be the next video on this. I will go ahead and shoot that update video and let you know how it's going to be, but I'd say he'll stay about in this container for the next year or 2 years. I think really all it needs is anywhere from 12 to 18 months at this stage, and then it'll be ready to go on to actually flower and fruit. Now, coffee plants are self-pollinating, so I don't have to worry about actually having another one in order to get that fruit that a lot of us want, or even the flowers that smell so good. Pest is another issue with these guys. Mealybugs, aphids, mites. You definitely want to look your plant over at least once a month to make sure you don't see anything. Always use a bright light on your cell phone or a flashlight, and just kind of look around, see if you don't see anything crawling around on it, see if you don't see anything that looks like a spider's web or any kind of filaments. That may indicate that you actually do have spider mites. So be very attentive and vigilant so that you can keep your plant happy and healthy and thriving, because the coffee plant is one of our better potted plant pals. They do produce something that's vital to us that a lot of people like, though they are a little bit toxic, so you got to be careful and mindful of that. But if you're not too sure what kind of pests you have, just send me a picture either on YouTube or Instagram, and I will try and help you decide what the best course of action against that pest would be. Alright guys, well that's really all I wanted to say about this plant. Like I said, if you're able to, leave me a comment and let me know if you've ever had any kind of success or failures with this plant. I knew somebody a while ago that was growing one, and I can't remember who it was, but it was in a little bit larger of a container, and it had the flowers on it and the fruit, and I always thought it was fake, but come to find out it was real, and it was really cool. So I know not too many people have a lot of success with these plants, but let me know if you ever have. If you've ever tried to grow your own coffee indoors, because I know that is a little bit tougher. And while you're at it, be sure to hit the subscribe button or the bell next to it. That'll way you'll know anytime I'm uploaded a new video. You guys take it easy, have a good one, and don't forget, always plant prudently. Thank you, YouTube.